the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus and his disciples left from there and began a journey through Galilee, but he did not wish anyone to know about it. He was teaching his disciples and telling them, "The Son of Man is to be handed over to men, and they will kill him. And 3 days after his death, the Son of Man will rise." But they did not understand what he was saying, and they were afraid to question him. They came to Capernaum, and once inside the house, he began to ask them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they remained silent. They had been discussing among themselves on the way who was the greatest. Then he sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "If anyone wishes to be last, he shall be the last of all and the servant of all." Taking a child, he placed it in their midst, and putting his arms around it, said to them, "Whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives not me, but the one who sent me." The Gospel of the Lord. Good morning. It is good for us to be here. In the gospel we just heard, Jesus predicts that he would be killed and rise again. The disciples do not understand. Instead, they are talking about which of them is the greatest. By the example of his own suffering and death, Jesus is trying to teach that the path to greatness in the kingdom of God leans downward, toward suffering, renouncing self, and service, rather than upward, toward good reputation and glory. To teach the disciples, Jesus centers on a child, a person of the lowest status in that society. It is there, the lowest, the least, the lost, who are counted as greatest in the plan of Jesus. Jesus is teaching that the one who is seen as most vulnerable and needs the greatest amount of care can also be the one who has the most to teach us about what it is to be Christ-like and God-like. Teaching is the most human occupation there is. This Sunday we honor our catechists. These are people who give of their time, talent, and energy to prepare our young people live lives of faith. Just about all of us have been teachers to someone in one capacity or another. Anytime we share our knowledge or show somebody how to do something, we are teachers. I was a grade school teacher many years ago, and when I look back at that, I really remember the poorest students, the ones who struggled, the ones who didn't seem to have much going for them at the beginning. Seeing them catch on and begin to succeed, to me, was a greater pleasure than teaching those who from the beginning had everything going for them and found school very easy. We can think about how the benefit of love, care, patience affects a rescue dog or cat we may take in and make a part of our lives. In our jobs, we may be called to help new hires. We think about the greatest, we think about the least. If you remember some of the episodes from The Honeymooners, this was a comedy that was very popular in the 1950s. You can still catch reruns on it on the cable channels. But Jackie Gleason and Art Carney brought the characters to life, and the Art Carney character was Ed Norton. And I remember Ed Norton giving some sage advice about the greatest and the least. And what he said was, "Remember to be nice to the people you meet on the way up, because you're going to meet them on the way down." Jesus directs his disciples' attention to those who are most vulnerable and whose gifts are overlooked and least developed. The disciples are called to turn to those of the lowest station, embrace them, and bring them into the circle. They are being asked to help the vulnerable, the poor, the weak, the struggling, those who may be hidden in the shadows. This church year till December 8th, we honor St. Joseph. St. Joseph can appear as a figure hidden in the shadows. Not much about St. Joseph is mentioned in the scriptures, yet he played a major role in the history of salvation. St. Joseph can be seen as a protector of the vulnerable. He protected Mary. Mary could have been stoned to death for adultery in that society had St. Joseph not taken her into his home as his wife. He protected the infant and the child Jesus. Jesus was seen as a threat to the authority of King Herod. King Herod wanted Jesus dead. In the gospel we just heard, Jesus is talking to his disciples who would have some power, prestige, and status in his circle of believers. He invites them to lead by giving up power and instead serve the most needy. Jesus leads his disciples to empower those who are loved into positions of servitude. Jesus empowers those who he loved to go into positions of servitude in society and place them in the center. This can be seen as a message of humility. Some years ago, I read a book by John Miller called The Christian Way. Miller talks about humility. He wrote, "Humility or poverty of the spirit is not a matter of thinking. It's not a matter of thinking low thoughts about ourselves. It is not a matter of groveling in the dust. It is simply a matter of knowing ourselves as we really are. And when we see ourselves as we really are, we will see then that we are poor." How this relates to the gospel is that we see ourselves as poor because we become aware of our weaknesses. We become aware of how vulnerable we are. We are nothing without God. We see ourselves as we are. We are not Christ. We can hope to see ourselves as becoming one with Christ. St. Teresa of Avila wrote about becoming one with Christ. She wrote, "Christ has no body. Christ has no body but yours. No hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes with which he looks with compassion on this world. Yours are the feet with which he walks on to do good. Yours are the hands with which he blesses the world. Yours are the hands, yours are the feet, yours are the eyes. You are his body." Being Christ calls us to consider the vulnerable, the poor, the weak, those who are desperate, those who are struggling. It's natural to think of service as being better if we do many great things that have a big impact on many people, but that's not how Jesus sees it. Jesus calls us to be the least of all and the servant of all, but how? We can start with our own families. People we live with or people we are close to may be in some way struggling. We can go out of our way to help them. We can be helpful in our own community. Now that the economy is struggling to improve after the pandemic, many businesses are starting to reopen and expand. New workers are everywhere. When we shop or use many services, many of the people there to help us are obviously new at their jobs. We can be patient, kind, thankful, and respectful to them. What makes us servants? It is our willingness to welcome Jesus no matter how he comes to us. Not too long ago, I was driving in heavy traffic, and I noticed a sticker on the back of a car in front of me, and it said, "Do you get this close to Jesus?" It makes us stop to think, what do we need to do to become one with Christ? We become servants whenever we spend time with a child or any other vulnerable person. When we imitate the humility of Jesus, we are servants. When we imitate the compassion of Jesus, we are servants. We can pray that Jesus gives us the heart of a servant. It is a heart of love. May God continue to bless us.